Hi, I'm Gary Gumble, founder of BeginningArtist.com, coming to you from Cuenca, Ecuador today, and I have a question for you. How often do you put all your time and energy into a drawing or painting and end up unhappy with the result? Well, what I'm going to show you today is why that happens and how you can change it. I'm going to show you the 5 creative tools that every artist uses. Get all 5 tools working together in your art and you can produce powerful, exciting work. Neglect these 5 tools and your work can end up dull and lifeless. What are these 5 tools? Well, just so you can remember it more easily, I put them all right here in this word, decide. Now, I'm going to show you how crucial these tools are by demonstrating how they were used in several different pieces of art. Now, the thing to keep in mind here, though, is these tools work just as effectively whether you're drawing or painting. Now, whatever subject you choose to draw or paint, whatever medium you use to draw or paint it, the first question you need to answer is, how can I make this fun to do and interesting to look at? Now, I've chosen for this demonstration this goofy little ceramic sculpture that was in an apartment my wife and I rented in Medellin, Colombia recently. And I thought it would make a good subject to demonstrate the effectiveness of these 5 creative tools. So the first tool you want to bring into effect is idea. And an idea, not just any idea, but an idea with a little imagination to it. So the first idea you need to think about is, how can I make it interesting? And then you create a design, an arrangement of whatever's going to be in your art. The next question is, well, what is going to be my star of this picture? In this particular situation, I chose the head of this sort of giraffe sculpture. Then I need to ask, well, how am I going to call your attention to this head? And that's where the rest of these creative tools come in. Now, as you can see in this drawing, I used the darkest color value, and that's one other tool. I used this color value black and put the most black where I want my star to be, where I want you to look first. That also created very hard edges in the head. Now, edges are, just so we're on the same page here, hard edges mean areas where there's a lot of contrast. And in this case, there's a lot of contrast between the black and the white of the paper. Soft edges are where there's very little contrast. Now, I continued the design by drawing in a large giraffe's head on the right. And you notice that I have that head pointing back to the left. That way I'm creating eye flow from the full giraffe to the big head and back again. You'll notice that I've only used a little bit of black in the big giraffe head because I don't want to call too much attention to the big head. I don't want it overpowering my star. And you've seen how all 5 creative tools are used. Idea, then you make a design, you draw the design, and you create your star and interest in the drawing by using your color values and your edges. Now, in this piece of art, it's also a challenge to take ordinary objects and create something interesting. And again, you start with that idea, and an idea with imagination. For this particular piece, I had to think about, well, how am I going to make this fun as well as interesting? So I wanted to do a different design than usual. Instead of arranging fruit on a flat surface, I did a small drawing sketch where I figured out that I wanted to pile them up, and then I would come in close to them. And just like the black and white drawing, one of the first questions I had to answer in my drawing sketch was, what's the star of this painting going to be? Well, in this design, I decided I wanted to make the small apple the star. And then the second important question I had to answer in this design is, how can I call attention to the star? How can I get your eyes to go to the star? And that's where the rest of these creative tools in Decide come in. First, I arranged the design in that drawing so the banana leads your eye into the art and to the star of the picture. It's like a, like a traffic arrow telling you where to go. And I'll explain more about that in just a second. But right now, the second way I call your attention to the star is by using another tool in Decide, the color values. Notice I created a dark background and made my star a much lighter color value than the background to make it stand out. And third, I used some of the edges of the other fruit to help call your attention to my star, and I'll explain more about that in just a second. Now, you may not entirely understand how these three tools, design, color values, and edges, are all working together in this painting to make it more interesting and to call your attention to the star. So here's how each one is playing an important role in this picture. Notice the yellow color of the banana is toned down. I don't use as light a value as a normal banana would. I toned it down so it's not as bright. And I want to use the edges of the banana to lead your eyes to the other fruit and to my star. Once it has done that, then the banana isn't important anymore, and you'll notice that its edges pretty much disappear. Now I've used color value, design, and edges in a similar way in the other fruit. Now remember, I said I made the background dark to make the very light color values of the small apple, my star, stand out. In the other apple and the mango, I also kept the color values darker than my star. In the larger apple and the mango, I also created the hardest edges closest to my star. Remember, harder edges call attention to themselves more than softer edges. So by putting some of my harder edges, my more noticeable, distinctive edges on the top of the apple and the top of the mango that look like they're right behind the small apple, my star, it makes the small apple more noticeable. Notice also that as the edges of the mango and the edges of the apple go away from my star, they get softer, and in a lot of cases they completely disappear. So just like the pen and ink drawing I showed you, first, design, color values, idea with imagination, drawing, and edges all work together to make a painting of ordinary objects much more interesting. Now the idea behind this piece was to take an uninteresting, ordinary object like this pill bottle, and by adding some imagination, create art that would be fun to do and be fun and interesting to see. Now usually when I start to develop an idea like this, I do drawings and sketches to work out how my design is going to be, what objects I'm going to use, what size they'll be, and where I'm going to put them, and what color values I'm going to use. I don't want my art to be just a random hodgepodge of values. It just doesn't work. But for this idea, I started to challenge myself and build my design on the fly. That is, as I imagined and drew each new object. Now, I want to point out that the ability to work this way occasionally comes from many years of experience drawing sketches before starting art. And the reason I almost always draw sketches before starting a piece of art came about because of a very painful experience. There was a time when I created a lot of failed art because I didn't plan what I wanted to do first. I just tried to copy what I saw. It was disastrous and ego bruising. So keep this in mind as I take you through the creation process for this particular piece. Now, my design started with drawing my star, the pill bottle, so it would be the biggest objects in the art. Now, its size would help call your attention to it. Then the next question was, how can I add imagination and change the bottle to be more interesting, to put more objects in the piece of art? Now, to complete the design, I created a couple simple blue, green, and blue watercolor tones that flowed from upper left to the lower right to help join all these disparate objects. And I want to point out one last thing. Now, previously I told you the pill bottle was the star, and that's not quite true. Only part of the bottle is the star. Notice that your eyes are pulled to the bottle cap and the area just below it. Now, here's the reasons that happens. First, like in this fruit still life, I created a very light color value on the top of the bottle cap by putting darker color and line around it. I did the same thing with the top of the bottle. But here I went even further. I put black only in the top of the label that's on the side of the bottle. That very dark value creates a very hard edge on that label, which also draws your eyes to that area. Now, remember, I drew the fish facing the star. I drew the edges of the weird snaky thing so they slithered right behind that area and pointed to it. I drew the satellite bottle cap blasting into space right behind the cap, which also drew your attention to it. All these design elements help point your eyes to the star of the picture. Now, I hope you remember these 5 tools that every artist uses: design, color values, idea, drawing, and edges, and use them in your own art. And to help you remember they're in the word decide. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video, so please share it with your friends so I know you did enjoy it. And leave me a comment below. I appreciate and read all of them. But most of all, share this video with the people you know, and then go make great art.